Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters. And yes, this is a bit of an interesting review for us. As you can see, we're not doing our casual, normal format with the raw reaction style, even though we are talking about a new film headed to Shudder very soon. Yes, we're talking about Nightwatch from 1994 and its most recent upcoming sequel, Nightwatch Demons Are Forever. Both films that we were not privy to before sitting down and watching this, especially the first one here. I know that this was remade in 1996, I want to say, with Ewan McGregor. We did not watch that one. At least I didn't. Did you get some time to watch that one?
I did not have time to watch that one.
Okay, I might.
I think it's on
after
Tubi.
this. Yeah, I know it's streaming on a couple of different spots, but the good folks over at Shudder and IFC were actually very kind and sent us screeners for both the new and the original. Just to say that essentially they will have both on Shudder. So if you're new to this and you've never seen these films, you can catch up with them just like we did. So why don't we start things off by talking about the original Nightwatch for a little bit here. Again, I don't think we're gonna get too deep into spoilers on these. I feel like that like us, a new audience is going to kind of discover this. So maybe we'll kind of dance around a couple things, leave a little bit on the table here for you guys to uncover. But if you are massive fans of Nightwatch and you'd like us to maybe go into a deeper look, maybe some point down the road, be a podcast episode or something. But Luke, how do you feel after watching Nightwatch from 1994?
I didn't know what to expect going into it. We got that screener, and it was a complete blind spot in terms of any horror or anything like that. Going into it, I got to say, I was pretty positive on it after watching it. I think that the opening's fun. They have, there's a serial killer on the loose. We have some of our main characters, Martin, Jens, their companions all having dinner, and they're kind of making a joke about it. And I really thought that kind of really set the tone there. Really got me feeling like one of the gang, and kind of, you always see these big news stories, and the idea is always, that can't happen to me, little do they know. But, I think that really did set the tone there. And I got to say, our main character being a night watchman of sorts, I thought that was a really good element to really build that tension. Overall, I did enjoy my time there. There's some, dark comedy elements there. They bring a lot of tension, some gore, some violence. It's really a complete package for me. So I did really enjoy my time with that 1994 original Nightwatch.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely it has some of that kind of 90s, like early 90s grit to it when it comes to like those kind of seedy underground thrillers. And this is one of those ones that there are some sequences in this that get pretty heavy. And I do got to say they set it up really well. And I think we were discussing it beforehand, where this first one, especially that opening, really sets the table for this kind of feeling like one of those classic urban legend stories where it's like the teens or the young adults hear about a guy with a hook for a hand going around killing people. Obviously in this one there's a guy going around scalping people. And I really gotta say, in this film especially, I loved the setting of the Nightwatch for the morgue. It adds so much room for just eerie tension and a lot of really, like almost borderline. You're kind of stepping into it for the first time, thinking, are there supernatural elements at play here? How much of this is in his head? How much of this is just him getting fucked with? And I gotta say, like, from a setup and the way they executed it, I thought it was a very enjoyable watch. Is it something that I think blew me away, or is something that I'm even going to revisit time and time again? Not really, but it is one of those ones where I'm really glad that I did take the time to watch it. It's only like an hour and a half, so it's not a huge commitment of a film, but I think it is one that, again, wasn't on my radar until this film was coming out, and now something that I'm really happy that I kind of got to check off my list.
I'm right there with you. They really do make use of that setting of the morgue. They have a couple fun characters, one being a doctor. I think that kind of play with our main character Martin there, I think was a lot of fun. And you're right with the kind of supernatural elements of you're wondering, is this all psychological? Is this going to actually fall into that supernatural realm because it is right for it? That setting is just perfect. So you're kind of always on edge. I think they really kind of bring the tension to make you feel like what is going to be happening next. And then with this serial killer out there and you're kind of getting the victims being brought in, really, again, it makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up, I think. Unfortunately, we're looking at this for the first time through a 2024 lens, and this did come out in 1994. I think, the story is there, the narrative is fairly strong, but I think going into it, when we're so used to kind of those connector pieces and never really trusting just the flat narrative, I think people might be able to connect the dots maybe a little sooner than what we would think. But I think maybe in 1994 it was a little harder because we weren't getting those unique stories like we do nowadays, where we always want to trick our audience. I think looking at it, if I was watching in 1994, I think narratively I'd be more blown away than I was in 2024. It's just kind of something you're always on edge. You're always suspecting something.
Yeah, and I think that was also an issue that was prevalent in my viewing as well, of again just kind of expecting that other pin to drop, but it never really gets there, because once you kind of realize what you're watching and what the story they're telling it's like, okay, it's pretty straightforward once all is said and done. And I think by the time we even get to the third act here, and there's characters in a room and all this stuff, that's all I'll say is I'm pretty much you know what's going on, and you're kind of like on board at that point. You're like, okay, now all the cards are out on the table. How the hell are these characters going to get out of this situation? And I think that's probably why I see what you're saying, but at the same time, I'm kind of like, I think I was easily accepting of it after that. After once the big final reveal is given.
Yeah, and I think the ending completely works. There's a lot of fun, like I mentioned, dark comedy. There's a lot of camaraderie here. I love the dynamic between our two male leads with Martin and Jens.
Mm-hmm.
I think they play off each other so well. And then when we kind of get into that third act and the higher tension, I think it all really does work, especially in the setting of the morgue. They present a lot of fun stuff in terms of a horror perspective. So, this one is going to be streaming on Shudder. So, if you haven't seen it before, I think this is going to be something go out of your way to check out. I think you're going to have a lot of fun with it. And like we said, it is a breeze to get through. It's about an hour 30, and it does really move. So it doesn't really feel like you're sitting in space for too long with nothing happening. I think this one for 1994 was a good outing.
And now that brings us to Nightwatch, Demons Are Forever, which again is coming out to Shudder very soon here. I'll give you a quick synopsis, just like we do in our Raw reactions. This one picks up, in real time, 20 so years after. Martin's daughter, Emma, takes up a night watch job to find out what happened to her parents almost 30 years ago. A meeting with Wörmer in his cell pulls the serial killer out of his coma and sets in motion a chain of fateful events. So yeah, this one, I gotta say, I think just coming off the bat really felt like a stretch, and that was the hardest pill for me to swallow. I think there are some competent elements here. I think that there are some points that I liked, kind of coming back to this world, seeing it almost 30 years later, and seeing some of our characters again. But I just feel like they never fully committed to the concept of, we're coming back to here, we're going to really spend time with our core cast of characters again, the ones that survive at least. And, we're going to really see what their lives are. They really try to settle this whole story on his daughter, which is fine, but I don't know if that's the story that we necessarily wanted to see.
Yeah, and I'm in total agreement there with you. Like I said, this was a complete blind spot. Nightwatch hadn't seen until just getting the screener here, so didn't know anything about it. And then knowing that we had Nightwatch Demons Are Forever on deck, and the way that the original ends, I was like, oh great, I get to spend more time with our core cast here. And 30 years later, we didn't have that long layover. If you're a fan of the original Nightwatch and wondering if we're ever going to get a sequel here, I was excited, to sit down with Martin and Jens again and pick up and see where they were, not knowing really conceptually what it was. And I went and read the synopsis and realized, we fell into, I would say, that typical tropey, what does a sequel look like? Well, we go with the daughters.
Cast, yeah.
And I was like, that was a red flag for me, because it was like, I think the story, the narrative should have been with Martin and Jens more so, with that PTSD element, and
Yes.
picking them up 30 years later. I think there's a lot, and we get those elements here, but I don't think we spend enough time to really flush out what exactly happened and how they're dealing with it. We get some returning characters, some familiar faces that you see from Nightwatch, but I think by the end of this film, you're just wanting to spend time with Martin and Jens. You just want to see them back together, doing their thing, and, seeing that fallout. But we don't really get that closure. We get some, but it still leaves you wanting more.
Yeah, and, there are elements to this that not necessarily retread the first film at all, but, you are kind of going through the same elements, just with like an updated area and updated, like, the hospital, the thing, it's the same place, it's just updated slightly. So those are cool to kind of see how some things have changed and some haven't, but like they do some interesting moments here. There is kind of like a sort of like a character who wasn't present for the first film, who has like a flashback with some audio cue at some point that we were discussing off camera here, that kind of doesn't make sense. So it seems like it's more for the audience and less for the character, and that kind of took me out of the movie a little bit. And this movie is far too long. There is no reason for this movie to be, in my opinion, almost 2 hours. I feel like if you were to chop off 10 to 15 minutes of this movie, we would have a much tighter story. I feel like there are segments of this where we are, like the first film, we're spending time with characters, but again, I think the frustration comes from, these aren't necessarily the characters I was excited to spend time with. I really wanted to see, especially with where they have Martin in some spots, I wanted to see more what was going on in his head. We get some of that, but again, like Luke said, we by the end of it, you don't get enough. You haven't spent enough time with those characters.
Yeah, and I'll say the film does kind of lag in some areas in terms of pacing, where you look at that first film and, you get that character development. You're not sitting in scenes too long. You're getting the feel for Martin, Jens, the entire crew, and it feels cohesive. Whereas this one, I think they sit in scenes a little bit too long sometimes with nothing really happening. I understand you're trying to, give us that narrative, and I think they're setting up for something a little bit later down the road for you to be suspicious of other characters, which, looking at this film and looking at the original Nightwatch, you do get that kind of dynamic in terms of that narrative and kind of them trying to switch things up. They do a couple extra twists and turns, I think, in Demons Are Forever that, kind of throw you off the trail, so to speak, which I do think works, but we do kind of fall in those familiar beats that we do see from the original Nightwatch. And yes, maybe updated to a certain extent, but I felt myself being a little too familiar with what I had gotten from the original Nightwatch. Yes, all the credit in the world to the writer and director to, give us something, maybe an updated version, and to give us those twists and turns. But I did feel that it was slightly familiar, that we had already seen it already with that original film. And, I think it works to an extent, but, there's only so much you can really take in there.
Yeah, and maybe it is the fact that we just watched the first one and then went into this, because maybe after a 30-year lull, this is gonna hit on a lot of points for people. But it did again feel like we're retreading certain elements. It has that legacy sequel problem in a
Yeah.
sense, which is so strange because it's like Nightwatch coming back to it. It's not Halloween. It's not anything else that's had a leg. It's not a Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's not something that was like huge that needed the those core characters to come back. It's a small story. It's a very independent film, and it's a well done thriller. I don't understand why we went this route with it. I don't understand why we tried to kind of do that. And I I think that's probably the biggest hurdle for me aside from the runtime, which I guess you can kind of say that's one in the same. So it does kind of leave me a bit disjointed, and I'm not going to lie, very much just kind of at a certain moment, just saying, okay, I'm really ready for them to kind of just get to the punch and wrap this thing up. I just want to see where our characters are left at this point in time, and that's not what I was hoping for. And I feel like I'm being very negative on it because I agree. I think that there are some really good elements to this, and I feel like overall, as far as it's shot, edited, everything, it looks good. It does look like a nice updated approach. I just think the real culprit of this movie comes down to the narrative and the route they decided to take. And it just leaves me saying, did we really need this sequel? I don't think so.
Yeah, and I'm there with you as well. That was my hesitation going into this one, knowing the concept, knowing the cast of is there a reason for this, or are we just doing it to do it? And I think it didn't really expand on the lore of the original Nightwatch. I think it was it was a fun watch for me, but it wasn't something that I felt fulfilled and was like it gave me the same feelings as the original. I think this one did leave me wanting more. I think you tighten up that narrative a little more, condense it some, don't spend so much time in areas that aren't really going to have a payoff by the end of it. I think this one would have been, right up there with the original, I think. But,
Mhm.
there are some beautiful shots in here. There is, as we are in the same setting of the original, there's some beautiful yellows in the hallway, I think, that really pop when a character's walking through. But yeah, you really do get that, especially us watching the original and now watching this one, you kind of get that updated feeling in terms of the modernization of, shot selections and how it's being presented. It really is visually a nice film. So, from that aspect, I think aesthetically, I think everyone will be pleased with it. But, I think this one was a bit of a stretch in terms of getting more out of the story. And I don't think you really focused on what we should have. I think there's a great audio cue for our weapon of choice in here, which I did absolutely adore. I thought that was smart, especially when you figure out what exactly it is. So I think there's a lot of things to like in this film, just not a lot to love, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think that's about sums up everything that I have to say about this one. I am gonna lean on worth a watch, just because again, like Luke said, there's a lot of competent elements here. There was a lot of really nice callbacks also in the score with this new one to the original, and I really liked a lot of that. And I felt like, again, the parts I do like a lot. And that is something that I guess is kind of that double-edged sword, because it's like I wish the whole movie had me feeling this way. And then there are parts that, again, I just kind of shake my head at. But I don't think it gets to that point of proceed with caution. It's about a middle worth a watch for me.
Yeah, and it is again a kind of a mixed bag where you see the familiar faces, you want to spend more time with them, and you keep thinking of what could have been, the potential that the film had.
Yeah.
Just and I think that's the biggest strike here is you get those players back, but you don't make the best use out of them in terms of that story and seeing that fallout 30 years later. I think there's a lot to love here. Just narratively, it just leaves something you wanting more. So I think for me, I'm gonna hit worth a watch as well. Uh, I certainly would say I would revisit the 1994 version. I don't know if I would go back and watch Demons Are Forever. To be honest, it's something to be tougher decision for me to make. I know I could turn on Nightwatch, even though that one is subtitled, so I want to be able to just kind of go
Freely
about my
watch
day.
it, yeah.
But that one does capture my interest throughout the entire film. Where this one, I was in and out, unfortunately. So
There,
there's some
there.
good things, and then there's just some things that fall flat for me.
I think the best way to put this is like there's an element of freshness to that first one that you sense and you feel there. It's not like totally original or anything, but it's like you can tell there's some energy there that just feels exciting and new, and the people behind it and in front of it are kind of saying, this is something we're really passionate about and making. And this one just feels like we gotta pull Nightwatch out of our back pocket, throw another one on here. And I that's really unfortunate. And again, I think if you guys are big fans of the original and you've been waiting for this, maybe you guys will like it a lot more. Maybe those callbacks won't feel as shallow as they felt to us. And I still encourage you guys to go check this one out, especially if you're a fan of that first, because again, this is a new franchise entirely to us, franchise sequel, two-parter to us entirely. So it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, I think as people maybe have been waiting a long time for this, if they are, then this could be a knock it out of the park for you. You might really like where they went with it. You might really like some of the story elements. Who's to say? I don't know. I'm just giving you our perspective from two people who just found out about this franchise these movies a month ago. I don't know. It's word salad. We just talked about 2 movies in one video. So there you go. Anyway, guys, I think that's going to wrap us up here for Nightwatch. Let us know down below if you guys are going to check these films out when they hit Shudder later this month. And we got a lot of great stuff up on the channel. We just talked about, Faceless After Dark, kind of this meta Terrifier take. And of course, we just had our spoiler review with Francis Galuppi talking all the spoilers for Last Stop in Yuma County. And we absolutely adored that. What an experience. So, alrighty. Until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Chinesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the horse shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, gonna smash your ass. 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 Splattercast, gonna smash your ass.